Hi, everybody. Mike Handcock here, the chairman of the Circle of Excellence group of companies. And today on our call, I have the money lady, as a lot of people call her, Lisa Dudson. And she's also a director of the Circle of Excellence group as well. So even I've got to be on my best behavior today, having Lisa on the call. And firstly, I want to start off, Lisa, by going back, I think 22 years. All right. And so that's going to be a nice starting place. And do you remember where we met?
Yes.
Okay, so tell us what you were doing at that stage of your life.
What specifically the event where we met?
Yeah, and what you were doing at that stage, and tell us what your life was like 22 years ago.
I think it was 22 years ago, so I think it might even be longer than that. I can't even remember the years, or 2003. Oh yeah, would have been. Yeah. So
21
basically,
then.
yeah. I had what was I doing? I was a financial and working as a financial advisor, and I had just won the inaugural Young Financial Planner of the Year award and was speaking at an event post winning that award. I think about winning the award. I mean, that's 22 years, it's a bloody long time ago. Sorry, you told me not to swear and I've already sworn. You came up to me at that
She swears
event.
on breakfast TV, everybody. I mean, they have to edit her on breakfast TV. She says
They do
shit
not. I
and
don't use
that sort
bad
of
swear
stuff.
words, just little ones. And yeah, you came up and said, let's do coffee. And I said, I think I said, don't do coffee, but we'll do green tea. So you like to
Yeah,
tell
that's
that
exactly
story.
what you said. You said, I don't do coffee, I do green tea. And then we met up in Lisa's office not long after that, the week after, and that started a friendship. And we've had several businesses together in that time that's gone on 21 years. And it's been a wonderful, wonderful time. And what I found in that 21 years, Lisa, and the reason why I wanted to take you back there is because I wanted to illustrate how important it is sometimes when you see somebody you think, oh, they're on a stage, they've just won an award, they're in a big space. Will I go talk to them? Won't I go talk to them? That you just sort of buckle up your belt and go and talk to them, because here, Lisa and I are 21 years later. You know, we've traveled to many countries together. We've done businesses together. We've had a great friendship with her partner, Graham and Lundy. The four of us are, well, they'll be at our place for Christmas in South Africa this year. So there's a whole range of things that happen once you actually, grow a set and walk up to somebody who's in at that stage in a big position and just say hello. Lisa, you've worked with a gazillion people and their money. And these days, you're a property investor. You've written the best-selling books on property investment ever in New Zealand. Um, you're doing a major property investment at the moment yourself with your partner, Graham. But you still dabble in financial planning and speak to clients every single week. So I want to ask you this. Firstly, what do you think the top three mistakes people make with money are? And I'm talking specifically business entrepreneurs, because that's who we have on our calls.
Yeah, I think, I was thinking about this a bit earlier today and making some notes. And I guess one of the big mistakes I think business owners specifically make is that they put all of their attention for making money into their business, right? And I think it's important to have most of your focus for making money into your business, but I also think it's good to have other strategies as well that sit beside that, because we all would like to grow our businesses and we'd all like to leverage them and we'd all like to sell them for a gazillion dollars just at the perfect time that we decide that we want to retire and don't want to be in our businesses. But in my experience, the success rate for that is actually quite low. So I think that's probably quite a fundamental thing, putting everything into your business. And look, if you're successful, then fantastic. But I think it's a high risk strategy. I think another mistake that I see business owners make is kind of not really paying enough attention to the top line and the bottom line of their business. So, you're paying attention often to the revenue focus. That's a key focus for a lot of business people. And I think most people are quite focused on revenue, but they're not quite so focused on maybe cost control and the gap between what you earn and what you spend, right? The gap between the revenue and the expenses. So you've got a big enough profit in there. I think that's another mistake. And I guess that the third one that comes to mind is the stuff that sits outside the business in terms of wealth creation, which is, paying down your personal mortgage, making sure you've got the right type of insurance personally, obviously in your business as well, wills, powers of attorney, superannuation, other more passive investment styles that will grow and supplement your wealth creation path alongside your business. So they're probably my top three.
Great. You wrote a book called Get Your Head Out of the Sand, which had a nice ostrich on the front cover. It was a red book. I think it's in the Octopus House, Chris, I think somewhere behind you on your left. And but in that book, you sort of covered a lot of the things that people go are the boring stuff, right? So the fundamentals. So as a business owner, again, what would be some of the fundamentals that we often overlook that you think are really important in the money side of our business?
I often see people putting their personal and their business expenditure all into one big pot, particularly smaller businesses, right? Because you kind of your business in many respects. And I think you almost need to wear two hats as a business owner. You need to wear the hat as the employer and the hat as the employee. So it's kind of having a bit of a budget within your business and then having a bit of a budget personally, and then kind of having a process for how money goes from, the business to you personally. I think that is something that
do you advocate paying salaries to yourself?
Yeah, I do, because, for a couple of reasons. One is it makes the budgeting of both much easier. And I typically, because it's quite hard in a business because your revenue can go, be up and down all over the place sometimes. So I often advocate trying to keep a reasonably small salary to cover your personal expenses, and then when the business does well, then maybe you pay yourself some lump sums to supplement that. So I think it's much easier from a budgeting point of view. The other thing that I've seen a lot of is people who are kind of, you get carried away when you make all this money and then you forget to put enough aside for your tax. And so in New Zealand, I'm not sure, how it works specifically internationally, but in New Zealand, if you pay yourself a salary, you often then can pay your tax along the way, so you don't end up in a situation where you suddenly go, oh my God, I've got tax bills to pay, and then scurrying around, and then ending up being a bit messy and a bit stressful. So I think, that's why I quite like the idea of paying yourself personally. I think it just makes things easier. I'm a big fan of systems when it comes to money management, because let's face us, there's not many people that love budgeting, right? We might get a bit of a boost of energy and be okay sitting down going through our finances, whether it's in business or personally, every now and again, but we get over it pretty damn quickly, right? So I think it's quite a good idea to try and do that every now and again, but then try and put some systems in place where they're a bit more set and forget, because okay, there's only the odd annual retentive person that gets super excited about doing all the nitty-gritty of budgeting. I mean, I don't actually like doing a lot of nitty-gritty of budgeting either.
Do you have a budget?
Yeah, I do. I do, but I've kind of got more of a high-level system, because I know how much I spend. I know how much needs to go from one entity to the other. And the way that I work things is I kind of look at it and go, there's three parts of my life, really, my financial life. And one's what do I need today to live my life? So that's kind of, let's call that my salary. And then I've got, I've got to need to make sure that my business earns enough to pay myself that salary. And then, I may do a few top-ups when the business is doing well personally, but then everything else in the business, I get it out of there into other wealth creation strategies. So building my property portfolio, buying some more shares, investing in other businesses, whatever it might be, that extra kind of goes into my long-term wealth creation plan. So you kind of have your living and then you've got your long-term.
Let's talk about that, because that's one of those things that I find that people will be listening to this. And it's lovely to see so many people on the call on Easter Tuesday. I'm really impressed by you guys. You must want some more money stuff. If you like this, tell us. We'll get Lisa back at some other time. I'm sure she won't mind. It's not a tough hour for her. She doesn't have to get up at 4 a.m. or anything.
But I'm usually getting fairly close to bed at 9 o'clock at night, to just saying.
Oh yeah, that's true. Yeah, I forgot. Well, it's not daylight savings anymore. So Lisa, the whole concept, like all of us as business owners, it's feast and famine, right? when you're in small business. It's, for some people, like December's their worst month, January's their worst month. They don't make any money there. I always find the first day of spring, as soon as that sun shines, if you follow up, people you've been working with for months, suddenly they all decide to buy, so it's sort of feast and famine. So you do have these times where a lot of money comes into your business. But then you talked about taking that money out of your business. What's the actual process that goes through your mind? And then when you know there's that money, and then how do you actually do it? Because of course you've got to pay tax on that money at some stage in the future as well. So is there a clue in here, or is it just, best guess?
Yeah, I kind of do it a little bit best guess to a certain extent. So let's go run through an example. So let's say that you projected your revenue was going to be 100 grand, right? So you do a conservative estimate of what you think your revenue is going to be. So let's say that's $100,000, and then you say, right, and I'm just giving the numbers small for simplicity, and it's, light round figures at this time of the night. So then you say like your expenses are 10 grand, right? So a conservative estimate of your expenses. So that means you've got $90,000 after your expenses. And then you go, okay, well, you got to pay 25% of that in tax. So then you take 25% of that 90 grand and then put that into, that needs to go into a tax account. Now, what are we down to? So we're down to 90, we're up to 65,000. And then we go, okay, well, now we're at 65,000. What we ideally want to be doing is, let's say we'll pay ourselves $5,000 a month. Goes in an automatic payment into our personal account. Now, because I've tried to work things on really conservative numbers, there'll be some months when you might earn twice or three times, that conservative amount. And then what you do is you just keep that money in that bank account. So you've got a bit of a build-up of funds. So when you have a bad month or two, you've still got enough in there to pay your $5 grand a month. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it certainly makes sense. It's interesting because I wonder how many people have a tax account, because you mentioned taking the money out and putting it into an account that's a tax account. I wonder how many people actually have that. My guess would be probably maybe one on this call, and it's not me, because I don't have a tax account. But the other thing is, I wonder how many people actually have money in their business to pay for the months that are coming up. So for instance, in our business, I get very nervous if we've got less than 6 months worth of expenses actually sitting in our bank account. So let's just say our expenses are 10 grand a month, to keep the round figures. So if there's not $60,000 in our bank account, I'm nervous, right? And, that's why COVID was a breeze for us. We went into COVID with 18 months worth of expenses in the bank account. And so, those first few months we could actually sit and go, how long is this bloody thing going to go on for? And see, you're making me swear. And then from there, we could plan from there. So I also wonder, what's your thoughts on that? Is that a good idea? Is that necessary? How do you do it?
Well, it's kind of a little bit like what I was saying before, but on top of that, you want to have a bit of a buffer. Yeah, so you might start the year with, I don't know, 30 grand, let's say, or in your case, 60 grand. Let's just say it's 30 grand. You start the year with 30 grand, and then you're expecting 100 grand to come in. So you do your budget on your 100 grand, less your expenses, less your tax, right? So you've got that buffer period. And the other thing that I also have is I have buffers outside of the business. So I might have a buffer in a share portfolio that's quite liquid that I can get access to. If it all went pear-shaped, I've still got access to funds. What concerns me a lot, I think, is a lot of business owners who put everything into their businesses, right? Every single thing goes in there, and they're always talking about, well, I've worked out that if I put money back into my business, I get a better return in the share market or the property market, for instance. Well, that may be true if everything goes according to plan, but often it doesn't. So even though you perceive that you might get a higher return on your investment, putting your money back in the business, when you think about it from a risk management perspective, you want to have a buffer, preferably in your business, and then one maybe outside as well, that if it does all go, a bit pear-shaped. So I think that's the way of managing it, but it's sitting down, isn't it? It's sitting down and going and doing some planning. And then going, okay, well, let's just look at the forecast for my business. The other conversation I've had with a few people of late, because in New Zealand, we've probably got a pretty horrific year with the economy coming in front of us. And so a lot of people are being made redundant. You know, and that's, you know, that is super tough. So I've said to some friends of mine who, you know, these are smaller business owners, I said, go and get a consultancy job. You know, rather than, because they're saying, oh, well, I've been living off my savings and I've worked out that I can still live on my savings for the next 6 to 12 months while I'm building the business. I'm like, no, I'm like, you know, and it's all right if you're 20, when, you know, you're quite young, but as you get older, I'm like, go and get a consultancy job. So a couple of people I know have gone and got consultancy jobs, 20 or 30 hours a week. They can still build their businesses up, but at least they can cover their expenses with that, you know, job, if you can get one in this environment, right? So I think, you know, and to me, that makes me a happier financial planner, because I think, again, it's a combination of focusing on your business, but also managing the downside. And as we get older, you know, that downside is more of an issue, right? Because we've got less time to recover.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think, you know, we've told a lot of people in the last 12 months to get a job. Not so much our Circle of Excellence clients, but a lot of people we meet who are running businesses, who come to our masterminds and things like that. Lisa, where was my question? It was in there. Oh, for the last 21 years that we've known each other, I've only known you to live in a house that you own for about the last 3 years. So for 18 years, 4 years. Okay. Yep. So for the last 17 years before that, you lived in a rented property whilst being a director of $1 billion company and New Zealand's biggest financial planner and blah, 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 and lots of other things. What's that about?
Well, look, you know, I bought my first house when I was very young. So I bought a house, and then you know, in New Zealand, and in my early 20s, and then I bought another house in London. And then when I came back to New Zealand, I bought another house. And then I had been back in New Zealand a couple of years, and I started getting very itchy feet. And I was kind of going, well, I didn't necessarily want to change my job. I didn't necessarily want to leave New Zealand, but I needed to change something. Something needed to change. So I decided to sell my house, and I went and rented in an apartment down on the waterfront, thinking I'll go and give that a whirl for 6 months. And, you know, maybe that might scratch the itch. And 17 years later, it took me to leave the place, which is what Mike's referring to about renting a lot of that time. And, you know, like I'd always been, you know, thought that you buy a home, right? Good compulsory savings. But when I started doing the analysis on it, I thought, well, really, you know, whether I owned a home or whether I owned rentals, it wasn't necessarily, you know, a big deal. I mean, I was comfortable renting. Luckily, I had the same landlord for that whole period of time, so there was no, you know, instability with that. But what I did is I just kept buying rental properties. So I just kept renting and then just buying rental properties. So at the end of the day, you know, I was probably better off because I was living in a nicer place than I probably would have afforded when I was starting out. And just, you know, on the waterfront. And then, you know, and then 17 years later, I ended up selling some of those rentals and then bought a beautiful large waterfront property 4 years ago. So, you know, it's just a strategic, you know, decision really. And I felt that I was better off, you know, financially. Now, having said that though, I'm very disciplined with money, right? A lot of other people aren't disciplined with money. And so if you're not disciplined with money, having a home and having a mortgage, the whole compulsory savings nature of that is actually quite critical. That wasn't an issue for me, but it is an issue for a lot of people.
Yep, very good. And it's, you know, Robert Kiyosaki always says, you know, don't put money into property that's not income producing. And that's what you did. And I think it served you very well. Sean's put a question in here. And that question is, what can you do with cash reserves that sit within a business in, say, a savings account? Can you invest these or put them into a term deposit?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just looking around and going, what are the options? I mean, I've just put some money, we had some money in our business bank account, and I just put it into a term deposit, and I think I got 6.1% because the interest rates in New Zealand are quite high at the moment. Now, that's not necessarily going to be, you know, what you're going to get on the long term. It's probably the peak of that. You know, you could probably a bit more of a complicated strategy, but you could put an offset account against your mortgage. There is potentially some tax issues with that depending on what country you're in. But you could offset accounts, for those who don't know, essentially, if you've got a $500,000 mortgage, you can have a $50,000 bank account with cash sitting in it, and then you only pay interest on $450,000. Now, it starts muddling up personal and business a tad, but it's not a bad way of reducing your mortgage costs, but still having some money aside for your business. So that could be an option. But basically, the short version is to just look around for whatever you can that's low risk and liquid enough to meet the requirements that you might think you might need in a business.
Yep. Are you ready to talk about cricket stumps?
Yes, I can talk about cricket stumps.
Okay, excellent. Yeah, whilst you're putting your slide up, and hang on, hopefully, let me just make you co-host here so you can. Whilst you're doing that, Lisa presented this many years ago, and I really love this as a way to explain investment, because all of us, want to be investors. Whether we've got the money currently to invest, whether we've only got an extra $100 a month to invest, or whether we've got something else, we get a windfall or something like that, then this is a way to do it. Over to you, Lisa.
Right, so just what's going on
And
there?
I call it a cricket stumps because it looks like a set of upside down cricket stumps.
I'll just pull the whole thing up. Oopsie daisy. Right, so I'll just have to move everyone's faces off to the side so I can see. So this is the kind of the way that I look at wealth. So at the bottom here, because I was trying to do a bit of an illustration about how it sits in my head. So what I look at is, I think we've got to get really good money foundations, right? And so this is things like your budgeting or your spending plan. It's just really awareness of what's coming in and what's going out, and most importantly, the gap between the two, right? Because it's that gap that you use to create future wealth. It's looking at making sure you've got your insurances, you've done some tax planning, or you've got a good accountant, you've done your estate planning, which is like wills, powers of attorney, trusts. That's an important thing. Property sharing agreements with your partner or prenups, all of those kind of foundational things I think are really important. And I look at them a bit like your foundations in your house. You've got to get your foundations strong before you can build. And then above that, so that's all your basic sort of money stuff. And then above that, we've got three main ways that you create wealth. One is property, one is businesses, one is the share market. Most things fall into one of those three categories. But within each category, like for instance, property, you've got a whole range of different types of property strategies. You've got trading, developing, minor dwelling, renovating, adding bedrooms,
sandwich leases, all sorts of stuff.
Yeah, so it's and the focus that I've got in that space at the moment is the development that I'm in the process of doing. And then you get into business, and you've got franchises, and then you've got I guess just your run-of-the-mill type of business. Lots of different types of business in there. You might be in a partnership, you might be on your own. And then in the share market, again, we've got different types of strategies there. You might be a trader, you might be into options, you might be in futures, you might be in Bitcoin. There's all sorts of things there. But at that level there, I think that's where you create most of your wealth, right? Or that's where you accelerate your wealth. At the foundation level, that's the kind of the slow, steady, over time, it will do well for you, right? Albert Einstein talked about compounding interest being the eighth wonder of the world. Because of that, that compounding effect of money over time. And so that's a really important thing to have. And I guess a really good example of that is KiwiSaver in New Zealand, or 401ks in the US, or, superannuation policies. You start putting in, I think with my KiwiSaver, I started in 2007 and I only put in like $87 a month, and it's up to about almost $80,000 now. So it's, you think $100 a month's not going to make much, difference, but it does over time, by the time I get to 65, it'll probably be close to about $180,000 on my predictions, right? Just on that $87 a month, with a tiny little bit from a couple of $100 from the government. So, but to really grow that wealth faster, then you've got to really pick a strategy within business, property, or shares. And I think it's important to pick one, get really good at it, and get refocused. Because I've been around these wealth creation circles for as long as I can remember, and I see people and they're doing a bit of this and they're doing a bit of that and they're doing a bit of something else, and one year I see them they're doing this and the next year they're doing something else. Even in business, I see people, every time I talk to them I feel like their business has changed into something else. And so I think it's important to be nimble and to move with where the opportunities are, but at the same time you've got to have some focus. So I think at that sort of top level, you have to pick a strategy. And I don't think it really matters what it is. You just need to pick one. And if I go and look at I look at the rich list in New Zealand, you typically find the wealthy have made their money in one key investment strategy. They may have added a second one later in their journey, but at the beginning, they typically put most of their effort into one strategy. So I think that's a really important tip for you within your, if you've got business owners, is to kind of get really focused and not get too distracted by too many other things. I mean, I'm doing a development at the moment but then I've got my business, I've got a small consultancy business where I work one-on-one with people, but that's pretty easy for me. And then I've got a much larger business, but I've got a management team, and, I just sit on the board of directors essentially, right? So it doesn't require a lot of time and energy, so that when I'm going into now, I'm putting effort into the development space, I've got the energy to focus on that and not dabble in a bunch of things. So coming back to once you've chosen your strategy, and I think your strategy also needs to be based on what you can actually leverage. So that means, when I look at leverage, I look at leveraging money, leveraging time, obviously. But the other thing that I think I'm really big on is how do you actually leverage your unique ability? Do you actually understand what your unique abilities are? And how do you leverage that? And does that sync with the wealth strategy that you've actually chosen? So if you're coming, so I guess most of you are business owners, so thinking about your unique abilities and thinking about your business, are they a good fit? Because if they are a good, happy fit, then it flows much easier, right? And often I don't think people have given much thought into that. So then once you've sort of started making some money out of whatever your main wealth creation strategy is, then I think you need to siphon some of it back into that foundational level to invest in something that's a bit more passive. Maybe like a long-term buy and hold rental property, maybe paying off your mortgage faster if you've still got a mortgage, some passive shares, adding to your superannuation. So it's not a lot of headspace, but it's just small drip feeds that you add in over time that will give you a backup plan just in case your main strategy doesn't work. And I think at that top level, you become a very active investor. You don't diversify, and you become an investor. You become an expert. At the more passive level, at the foundation level, it's where you store, grow, and protect your wealth. And it's passive. You do diversify, and you do probably need to use experts, because you don't necessarily have the time and the skill to be able to do too many things. Because remember, there's an opportunity cost for doing too many things.
Absolutely.
So I think that's probably a pretty good overview, I think.
Yep. So I'll sum it up, and then I've got another question for you. So foundations, insurance policies, banking, wills, trusts, any agreements that you need to have to basically store and grow your wealth. 3 active strategies. Pretty much everybody on this call has chosen business as their active strategy, but you can look at your talents and maybe use those in another active strategy. I've always done well in property development because it stimulates my creativity. I'm able to use my creativity in it. So that's been another thing. Shares, I only do passive because to me it's so mundane and boring sitting watching graphs and things like that. And I'm not relational enough to sit in boardrooms and actually and learn what's going on about, a company to invest in it or something like that. So, but I think one of the keys that you said, Lisa, is look at the areas of your unique abilities and where you can add value in this. And I think that's great. Okay, I'm going to boot the screen sharing at the moment. So there we go. So you should be booted now. We'll come back to my question. Lisa, you said, and I love this saying, but I want you to explain it for everybody. And it may seem very simple for people when I say it, but there's real power beneath this, which is why I love it. I've heard you say many times, wealth is 95% mindset and 5% technique. What's that about?
Well, I think that a lot of people have hang-ups about money. You know, I wasn't taught it at school. I mean, it's like we all do. We have excuses for all sorts of things, right? I wasn't taught it at school. You know, it's not important. You know, other things are far more important. And I'm going, well, that's all very well, but you know, I sat there with a box of tissue the other day where I was watching a doco in New Zealand about the retired people post 65 who were struggling to eat and turn the electricity, you know, turn the heating on in wintertime because they couldn't afford it. You know, which I just think in a country like New Zealand is just absolutely tragic. So, you know, you may not think it's important, but it is important. So I think, you know, having a healthy relationship with money is super important. And if you have that healthy relationship and that you do put some focus into you're thinking about money and planning money and thinking about how money will bring you a strong future, then I think finding the technical skills to how to actually do it is the easier part. Right. And you know, and I think, you know, we all know this, we're our own worst enemy a lot of the time, right? We get in our own way too much of the time. So I've always had a reasonably healthy attitude with money. I don't look at money like I can buy this big house or I can have this flash car, or, you know, I mean, I'm a pretty down to earth sort of person. I don't, you know, I spend a fair bit of money on travel, but even then, you know, I'm sort of mindful about how I do that. You know, flashy things is not who I am. But on the other side, money is important to me because at a very early age, you know, I was brought up in quite a conservative sort of family, and father was a tradesperson, mother worked part-time. Both of my parents had a couple of extra part-time jobs to make ends meet. I was the first person in our extended family to, you know, go to university ever in our whole family through many generations. You know, and I was kind of, you know, I remember my mother saying to me, what are you doing wasting your life going to university? Because her dream for me was to marry the local bank manager, have 2.4 kids in the white picket fence. And I just thought I'd rather freaking slit my wrists. So, you know, for me, it was about how do I create the freedom to choose? Whoops, was there a blip in there for that one?
3 second beat. No, you said frickin', so that was all right.
You know, how do I create the freedom to choose the life that I want? How do I create that independence? I didn't want to be dependent on a man, you know, so I wanted to be dependent on myself and have those choices. So the only way that I saw being able to do that was to be, you know, financially educated and financially smart. And that's why that I've had a focus on money, not because I like the bright, shiny things, because I really don't give a hoot what anyone else thinks of me, you know. So does that...
Yeah, it's a good starting point because I see Philippe's put in the chat, yes, talk about mindset. So let me ask you this question. You and I know, because we talk to a gazillion people, that a lot of people don't have a very abundant money mindset. They almost think having money, you know, that's a problem because either somebody's going to take it or you're not going to become a nice person. And then on the other stream, they've got used to living at a certain level and not seeing that they can move up to another level, even say buy a new car. I mean, you know, I don't want to ask the question, but the great question is, when was the last time you bought a new car? Lisa, you're probably the most recent person I know to buy a new car. Because I was in it a couple of months ago when we were in New Zealand. But, you know, it's things like that. People just don't see themselves being able to do that because they've got in this, I don't want to call it a rut, but it's a rut in their mind about money. And we almost think, you know, how many people do you talk to of businesses that are business owners that say, if I could improve my revenue by 20% this year, it'd be great? I just got asked that question this morning, actually, by somebody in America that I was talking to. And I said, well, if I could double my revenue this year, I'd be very happy, right? But people don't tend to think like that. So what are some of the keys to adjusting our mindset to have a much more prosperity-based mindset, and to have a mindset that then can lead into feeling more energized about doing what we do in our business to create the money?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first thing that comes to mind is you've got to get all that shit out of your head, right? So then it's kind of going, well, how do you do that? So I guess there's a couple of things. One is, you know, I think affirmations can be quite useful, you know, just saying to yourself, I've got a positive attitude with money, you know, those come up, brainstorm some ones that I think, connect with you. I think it's around potentially going and getting a little bit of education about, financial things. It might be going to see a financial advisor. I know that, the people that come to see me, they typically say things like, gosh, you're not what I expected from a financial advisor, because I'm really trying to give people some education and give them some positivity and make them feel kind of, that it's not this really tough thing. So I think it's getting a bit of education, it's having some affirmations, it's mixing with more like-minded positive people. I think that's a really key thing. And it's just having conversations about money. Like, it's really interesting. I met this guy many years ago who was a psychologist, and he used to deal a lot with people with quite major, mental issues and drug and alcohol abuse issues. And he said, we'd sit around and we'd talk about all these things that they're doing. Some of it's pretty horrific stuff. And he said people would talk about their sex life before they would talk about how much they earn. Right?
Yep.
So I think, and I've always tried to make, I probably in the financial services industry, when I came into it, they were all old men. So I was kind of a young, chatty person who, has been known for swearing a few times on television, and more than a few times, and, had a few blips on national radio and blah, blah, blah. But I don't really care, because I'm trying to lighten it up a wee bit. I'm trying to make it not too serious, right? Everyone's bloody way too serious about things. So it's like, I think we just need to have more conversations, not get so worried about people judging us, and just sharing. And I think the more you talk about money, the more comfortable you are with it, and then more those negative things tend to, float out of your head. So that's, that's probably a different view that you might get from a psychologist, but that's my simple, look at it.
Well, the psychologist is probably dealing with their issues around money themselves. So I wouldn't necessarily be going to them for some advice about how to solve those issues when they're getting paid their per hour rate. And it's interesting, because one of the things that I found myself saying to somebody recently, and I was on a call and Lundy heard the call and she got off it and she said, that was really good advice you gave that person. But the advice was, and she doesn't say that normally, I have to tell you guys. I mean, so she's used to my advice. So this was the first time she heard that one. And I was talking to a business owner and I said to them, and they were saying, oh, they're not going to be able to get this much for their product. And I said, well, when was the last time you spent that much for something? And they said, I've never done it. I said, well, until you buy something worth that, you're not going to be able to sell something worth that. And I think that's the thing, is that we play so small, some of us, that, we can't charge more than $100 for our product, because we're out in the marketplace shopping on all the apps to try and get something for under $100, rather than just going and buying something that we want, that we deserve, enjoying it, not feeling guilty about it. And I'll use a car as an example, because, I mean, I know, Lisa, you're not a fan of cars, but a lot of people are. And I think if you've made a certain amount of money and your business is doing well and you want that car, and you and I both know somebody we used to work with who was from Australia, short, lot of tattoos. He was only motivated by the new car that he could get, and he'd made multi-millions of dollars, and he was motivated because he wanted to upgrade his car. So I guess what I'm saying, whether it's a car, for me, a guitar, for somebody else it could be fashion, for somebody else it could be something else. Look at the things that are motivating you. And I want to come to the questions, but I want to just finish this off, and then I've got a couple of things. We'll do questions, and I want one more comment from Lisa, and then we'll open it up for questions. When I first started as a financial planner many, many years ago, one of the things I did personally, which I really liked and it really worked, and I used to share it with a lot of people, but I haven't shared it for a long time, is that, let's just use your round numbers. If you're making $100,000 a year now and you've got some goals, well, let's look at the goals that you may have. I might want to, I'll just use some here. We want to renovate our apartment this year. We've got special guests coming at the end of the year, but we want to renovate this year. That's going to cost a few bucks. But in between then and that, we also, we may want to buy a new sofa, right? I might want to buy a new guitar. So now we start with the low-hanging fruit on that list. Let's say a sofa might be $3,000 or $4,000. I don't know what they cost. And the first thing we buy when we get some money is that sofa. So now we're sitting there and we're looking at our new sofa and we go, we're moving ahead. Life is good. We've got a new sofa. So the next thing we buy, the next thing we do is that we remodel one of our bathrooms and we go, wow, we've got a remodeled bathroom and that may have cost us $10,000. I don't know what they cost to remodel as well. So what you do is you start ticking those boxes off at the low levels, and before you know it, and I found this as a young financial planner, before I knew it, within 2 years, I had been able to get everything new in my house and even able to buy a new house. Because I just got in the habit of going, instead of going, there's this big goal that I want to get, I went, next month I'm going to buy a sofa. So next month I went hard, I made that extra $3,000, I bought the sofa. Next month I want to buy a new guitar. So next month I bought a new guitar, and suddenly I was surrounded by more abundance. So that really served me. So I just wanted to throw that out there. Let's go to some questions. Philippe said, can you talk about delayed gratification? I see many people focused on the short term. Do you have an opinion about that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think just picking up on what you were saying before, it comes down to working out what you value. So rather than just spending money for the sake of spending money or not spending money, it's actually working out what are the things that you value. And one of my things that I value is travel. So I'm not big on spending a lot of money on flashy cars, because I'd rather put that into my retirement fund, and I'd rather put that into travel, and that's what's important to me, right? So I might be, some things I'm quite tight with my money on, and other things it doesn't even give me a second thought when I go and spend money on it. So I think it's deciding for you what's actually important. And I think delayed gratification, I mean, that's something that I've done quite a bit of over the years, because I've sat down and said, okay, well, again, what are the things that are important to me? And, I always say, how do you eat an elephant bite by bite? And that's kind of what the example that you were giving, Mike. It's like, okay, well, you want this. Okay, well, how do we start? You want to create, again, picking numbers, $1 million for your retirement. Okay, well, let's start breaking that down. Where are you today? What are the different options you've got? You might put $100 a month into your superannuation. You might put $500 a month into your share scheme. You might put another $1,000 into paying off your mortgage faster. Multiple things that you can do, and then it's so you kind of know where you are. You know where you want to be. You start putting some goals into place, and then you start going, what are the things that I value? Because you spend money on things that you value, and things that you don't value, you take the money from that, and then you start putting that into things maybe for the long term. Now, I've been tracking my wealth and income for I think it's about 18 years now. So what I do is I have a very simple spreadsheet, assets, liabilities, as per entity. Every April, I cut and paste it into a new worksheet, and I update all of my figures, right? And then I have another one where I list all the income that I have from all the different sources, and I've been doing that for about 18 years, so I can see my income through the years. And then I do another one right in the front of my spreadsheet, and then it's projections. So I do assets, liabilities, and then I kind of do, okay, if I project them all forward 5, 10, 15 years into the future, what is my wealth going to be in 5, 10, 15 years? And then every 5 years, I redo those numbers. So the last 5 years that I did, I was over. So my projections were quite conservative. This current 5 years, I may undershoot slightly because we've been a bit of a shit time in the market. So again, it's all that, it's that tracking, and it's that, it's that delayed gratification in many respects, because I'm kind of holding back on some things to put money into other things, knowing that over time they grow, and then I've got a lot more freedom of choice.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm so glad to hear you do that. I don't know if I learned that from you, but I do exactly the same thing. And I've been doing it for years and years and years. So I can't tell you how long I've been doing it for, probably at least 10 years, I'd say. And I do it. The only difference is I do mine in December. I tend to work my brain on a calendar year. I don't work it on financial years. So
just do it on a financial year, simply because that's the time where I'm preparing everything for the accountant, with our tax year finishing on the 31st of March.
Yep. No, good. Very good. Hannah says she loves you already. Everybody loves Lisa, Hannah. Don't worry about that.
Thank you, Hannah.
Susie says, great. Talking about money is very important. I agree. Great advice, Lisa, from Sahaja. Affirmations, education, positive people talking about money. So Philippe's put a connection to Amazon. Good money made simple savings and steps. Oh, thanks, Philippe, for the guitar things as well. Steve says, what were the foundational requirements? So back to that, wills, insurance, wealth protection, life, health cover, what else?
Your budgeting, superannuation, could be paying off your mortgage, like what's your plan to paying off your personal, save for a deposit or pay off your personal mortgage, maybe a small share portfolio as well, emergency fund for a rainy day. I think that pretty much covers it.
Yep, great. And I think just back to the spreadsheets, just for a minute, one of the things that I like is I like sitting down every December and seeing how things have moved.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
last year or the year, no, it might have been the year before, was just a dreadful year for my superannuation account, KiwiSaver, right? It was just dreadful. And like it went backwards. Even with all my contributions, I went backwards. I was fuming. But actually, when I look at it now, I just go, it's actually moving quite nicely, and I'm still on track for where I thought I'd be on track for when I started that spreadsheet, you know, umpteen years ago. So it's doing well. So that gives you get gratification from that. So this delayed gratification a lot of people have. Why am I putting money into this property? You know, I'm never going to realize money out of it. Well, you do see it every year and things like that. I mean, property investments being one thing, you can go and get real estate appraisals. You can look at the market rates. There's a lot of countries that give you market rates on property in your area, and you can pretty much understand what that is. And you can see if you're going forward, backwards, up, down, and the share market's very obvious for that.
Yeah,
Lisa, I want to...
Oh, sorry, can I just adding one thing onto that before you finish, is that,
Sure.
you know, I've got a lot of professional corporate clients, and they go, and I talk to them about some of the stuff, and they go, oh yeah, whatever, you know, I'm on a budget, you know, and I like going out for nice dinners, and I like travel, and I like this, that, and the other thing. And then I actually give them my little simple spreadsheet, and they start playing around with it, and they see things growing. And I also, one of the things that I do is I write down how much debt that I paid off the previous year, and they go, oh my God, you know, and they come back to me and like, that spreadsheet is awesome, you know, and because it does some projections. And so they start getting excited about the fact that you know, that things are going up and debt's going down, and that their net worth's growing. And I have a net worth figure that I have every year that I've tracked. So that is actually probably, if I think back into about one of the things that has been the most useful for a lot of my clients who are typically going, you know, they're bigger earners and therefore bigger spenders and don't quite get their shit together, that's actually been a bit of a game changer. So it's a really key thing. And it just brings it into focus all the time about how you're tracking.
Yep. Sean's naturally asked, because you promoted it now, can you share the spreadsheet or budget template?
I can. It's very basic, but yes.
Chris, take a screenshot and you can send it to anybody who's on the call now. And
I'm happy to send it. I just don't know. I think I can attach a file. I'm a bit useless for this stuff.
No, you can attach a file. It's easy.
Right. All right, I'll do that while I'm talking, so we're like a multitask.
So let's go. While you're multitasking, I want to go now to any questions that anybody's got, anything that they would like to have. Hannah's asked, do you have an Instagram page to follow?
No.
No, you can follow Lisa on Facebook. She's a Facebook type of person.
And to be honest with you, I'm a bit shit with social media. I do quite a bit in the media, but I don't do a lot of social media. No,
Lisa's not a social media person. I know you're a social media person, Hannah, but my Instagram page is really only for friends and family. LinkedIn is the place where I focus. So you can follow her on LinkedIn. You can follow her on Facebook. Any other questions?
I have a question.
Yes, Heather.
So Lisa, if you're looking at a financial strategy, how would you break up between investment and paying debt off? Would you pay all the debt off first and then invest, or would you split the money and invest and pay off debt, you know, credit card debt?
It's probably dependent on the situation and the goals. I think like often if you're a property, like I'm talking about from a New Zealand perspective, because that's where my expertise is that I'm often saying to people to do a bit of both, because in New Zealand, if you can pay your debt down faster, you've got a bigger amount of equity to borrow against to go into a property investment. So there's that component. The other thing I find is that with a lot of people, they will pay off debt at the same pace, regardless of whether they save or not. So for instance, because it's like if I stand up at a seminar and I had 1,000 people in the room and I said, okay, right, you've all done a budget and you've all said, right, you've got $1,000 spare a month. What are you going to do with it? Go on holiday, save for a car, spend it, have fun. And the occasional person will say, I'll pay off my mortgage. So I know from being in this industry for 25 years that if people have spare money, they will often spend it before they save it. So it really depends on the type of person you are. If you're super disciplined, then sometimes you can focus on paying off your debt. It may be a better strategy. But for people who are a bit hopeless with that, I often put them into a savings plan because it's multiple streams of income and it's just saving them from themselves to a certain extent. So a lot depends on the context. The other thing also too about, like, for instance, they're putting, if you're having a small share portfolio, it gives them liquidity. So if things do go a bit pear-shaped somewhere, you do have it, you don't necessarily want to access it because it is more for the long term, but you can access it if you need to. So yeah, a few different things about context.
Beautiful. Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, Lisa, you are free and clear. Did you find your spreadsheet? I know you're going to have to send it to Chris. I'll take the pressure off you, and we'll distribute it out to the people on this call because we have a screenshot of who was on the call. You're getting applause from Ian and others, so well done. So that was good. Hopefully you did find that call really great. Lisa, I want to thank you so much for being on the call today. I know it's not early in New Zealand, so I really appreciate you staying up. I know you're normally in bed nice and early. Looking out at that wonderful view that you have, and I look forward to catching up with you soon. And folks, if there's anybody else that you'd like to hear from or any other topics that you'd like to talk about on our global intelligence updates, just drop me a note and we'll try and make it happen. Folks, thanks very much, and we will see you all later, and ciao.